Hey, it's me. Thanks for tuning in again. Listen, watch this video. It's going to help you get through a situation if you're ever pulled over for DUI. Watch it and learn. When the police officer approaches your vehicle, one of the first things he's going to ask you for is your identification. So just go ahead and give it to him. But I want you to understand that the police are trained to elicit certain responses. So he's going to ask you, how much have you had to drink tonight? Okay. Already assuming that you have had something to drink. He could ask the question a different way, like, have you had anything to drink tonight? Which gives you the option of saying yes or no. All right. But he won't do that because he wants the answer to be, yes, you've had something to drink. So they are trained to eliminate options. All right. So he's going to pose the question to you where you have to give him an answer that's only in the affirmative to him. All right. So how many drinks have you had tonight? Assuming that you're going to say, I've only had a couple. Okay. Or hoping that you only say, I've only had a couple. So understand, when he asks you, how many drinks have you had tonight? You don't have to answer that. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking they can say, well, I'm going to tell the police officer I only had one drink or two drinks and I'll be okay. But no, understand this. When the police are asking you questions like that, they're gathering evidence against you. Okay. So if the police officer is already suspicious that you're driving under the influence, you support that suspicion by admitting that you've had even a sip of alcohol. You understand what I'm saying? So you don't have to answer the question. And most people say, well, I want to be honest with the police officer. Okay, honesty is going to get your ass in jail. Okay? And not answering questions is not being dishonest. It's not lying. It's choosing to exercise your right to remain silent, because when he asks you those questions, you're under investigation. So listen, you don't have to answer. All right. And don't think you're helping yourself by admitting that you had anything to drink. Just don't admit anything. That's very important. Now, the officers, if you say you've had a couple of drinks and he's suspicious that you're driving under influence, he's going to ask you to step out the vehicle. Don't resist. Just step out of the vehicle. All right. And even if you say you haven't had anything to drink, or even if you say, I don't want to answer those questions, he's still going to ask you to step out the vehicle. All right. So just do it. I'll tell you what comes next. Depending on what state you're in, he's going to ask you to perform a number of what they call field sobriety tests. All right. These include what they call a horizontal eye. There's a scientific name for it, but it's an eye test. And what they do is they take a light pen and they flash it in your eye. And they ask you not to move your head, but just to follow like the light. Okay. Just follow it. All right. I can't do it. And I ain't drunk right now. And there's some scientific response that your eyes do where it's something crazy. All right. And it's not admissible in most states because it's too scientific. What's important about that is if it is admissible at your trial, the officer can't explain the scientific nature behind it. So if you have a good attorney, they can get that part of the test kicked out or inadmissible, because the officer has to be able to explain the scientific portion of that test. All right. So the eye test, all right. But listen, you don't have to take that test. All right. In most states, the officer will then ask you to perform what they call a 9-step walk and turn. All right. It's a heel to toe. And what the officer is supposed to do is give you an example of how to perform the test. All right. And not just a few steps. He's technically, and especially in Virginia, the officer is supposed to perform the entire test. He's supposed to show you how to stand. He's supposed to show you how to go heel to toe, 9 steps, how to pivot and come back. He's supposed to show you that entire test. Simply explaining to you how to do it is not enough, all right, because the test is confusing, all right? It can be. especially how to, and where they get people is they say, oh, they didn't perform well on the test because they started wrong or they pivoted wrong, all right? And that's where they get you, all right? Or they didn't walk in a straight line. Now understand, they're having you do a 9-step walk and turn on an imaginary line. Even sometimes if there's a street line there you can use, the officer won't let you use it sometimes. Sometimes they'll say, just imagine a straight line. And that's where they'll get you also, okay? Because now you have to walk, do a 9-step walk and turn on an imaginary line, and they expect you to walk straight like an arrow, pivot correctly, and come back straight on an imaginary line, okay? Sometimes when you're stopped for this, it's at night. Sometimes you may have high heels on, or men may have boots on. It's dark. You really can't see the road. I mean, they put you in a bad position to take these tests. But again, expect to be asked to do a 9-step walk and turn. Another test they'll ask you to do is what they call the one-legged stand. They'll ask you to stand on one leg, and you can't have your hands out. Like, you have to have your hands to your side, okay? And you have to stand on one leg, and you have to count to 30. Sometimes they'll tell you to count backwards. Sometimes they'll tell you to count from 31 to 60. And you have to do that, and you have to stand on one leg, and it'll be like a statue. All right, if you sway a little bit, which is what you're going to do, they'll say you fail. If you use your arms for balance, which is what you're going to do, they say you fail. If you don't count properly, they say you fail. If you put your leg down to catch your balance and put it right back up, they say you fail. All right, but that's the one leg. That's the one-legged stand, and they're going to ask you to do that also. Another test they're going to ask you to do is to reciting the alphabet. But they're going to be funny. They're going to say, okay, recite the alphabet backwards. Or they might say, okay, recite the alphabet, but start at the letter L instead of the beginning. Like, why? Because they're trying to confuse you, all right? And most people, like, who recites the alphabet? I know the alphabet, but if you're asking me to recite it starting at M, it could be a little difficult. I mean, for me, not, but for some people, yes. And you got to understand, this is the case for people where English is not their first language. So they have an incredibly hard time doing this. But even for people where English is the first language, it can be difficult because you're under pressure, you're outdoors, the police got their flashlights shining in your face, and they're expecting you to perform. And you may be a little tipsy. So that makes it hard also. So again, they're going to have you recite the alphabet in a funky type of way. Good news is that in Virginia and most other states, you don't have to take these tests. You can say, no, I refuse to take any tests. I refuse to make any statements. I refuse to take anything or do anything, all right? And that's your right, okay? It's essentially, you have to look at it like this. Taking these tests are equivalent to words spoken by you. And you have the right to remain silent. So if they're going to use these tests as a means of you expressing yourself, because remember, the tests only go to probable cause that you're guilty of DUI. And they need that probable cause to arrest you. So everything that I've said to you, any statements that you make, okay, in the affirmative that you've been drinking is probable cause for that officer to arrest you. Any field sobriety test that you take that you don't do well on, that's probable cause for the officer to arrest you, all right? The driving behavior that made the officer stop you, that's not necessarily probable cause to arrest you for DUI, but it's suspicion that you are driving under the influence. So that's the probable cause or reasonable suspicion that he needs to stop your vehicle. But whatever happens after he stops your vehicle is in addition to that and goes to probable cause to arrest you. So remember, you don't have to make any statements to give him probable cause. That's what he's looking for. You don't have to give any statements or do any tests because those are probable cause issues for arrest. Don't give him that. Just refuse to take the test. And there may be other consequences in certain states. If you don't take the test, you have to check in your own state. But in Virginia, just don't take the test. So we're past the point of where you've been pulled over. He's already asked you questions. Hopefully you've remained silent. He's asked you to do the field sobriety test. Hopefully you haven't done them. So now in Virginia and in most other states, the police officers have what they call a preliminary breath test. It's a small pack. It's a breathalyzer that they carry in their vehicle. And in Virginia, this is inadmissible in court. This test is inadmissible in court because of the nature of it, all right? But it's used, once again, to establish probable cause to arrest you for DUI. You don't have to take this test, okay? This test is not required. It's just like you don't have to answer questions. It's just like you don't have to take the field sobriety test. You do not have to take the preliminary breath test on the side of the road, because the result of that test goes to probable cause to arrest you for DUI. Understand that. Okay? So he'll ask you, hey, do you want to take the test? They're trying to trick you because there's two tests involved here. One on the side of the road, and if you are ultimately arrested, there's a test at the station where you are required to take that one. And there's a consequence for not taking that one. And we'll get to that. So the officer will confuse you and say, well, this is a test you have to take, or maybe a little misleading into getting you to think that you have to take this test instead of the other one. Or maybe not misleading, but he won't be clear, all right? And he won't like to answer a lot of questions that you may have. Like if you ask, hey, do I have to take this test? He said, well, it'll help you, okay? So you never know, but you don't have to take that test, because if you blow in that and it comes back that you have alcohol in your system, right, even if it's below the legal limit, they can use that as probable cause to arrest you. So don't take the test. And another thing on the test, if you've declined to make any statements and you've declined to take any field sobriety tests, this officer, outside of potentially your driving behavior, has very little evidence to arrest you for suspicion of DUI. So if you do the right thing in asserting your rights to remain silent, but then you take the side of the road test, that result is all he needs. So you've wasted your time in declining to make any statements, in declining to do the field sobriety test, but then taking the preliminary breath test. Because then that's all he'll need for probable cause to arrest you for DUI. Now, hopefully we're at the part where you've declined to make statements, you declined to do the field sobriety test, and you declined to take the preliminary breath test. So understand this. At this point, the only evidence that the officer has that you're driving under the influence is potentially your driving behavior, which is the reason why he stopped you. And this is going to be in every single police report where a person is arrested for DUI. It's going to say that you had bloodshot, watery eyes, that you were unsteady on your feet, and that you smelled of alcohol. That's going to be in every single police report where a person is arrested for DUI. So driving behavior, smell of alcohol, red shot, watery eyes, okay? Don't add to that by admitting that you've been drinking, by taking the field sobriety test, and by taking the preliminary breath test. So eliminate as much as you can, all right? So the only probable cause he has, again, driving behavior, bloodshot, watery eyes, and the smell of alcohol, all right? Is that enough probable cause to arrest you? Probably, all right? But remember, we're looking at the bigger picture here, all right? If he arrests you only on those factors, but he doesn't have those other test results, the preliminary breath test or the field sobriety test, and he has no statements from you, if he arrests you and you go to court for this, you're in a way better position, because having probable cause to arrest you for DUI is one thing, but having enough evidence to convict you beyond a reasonable doubt is another thing. And without the field sobriety test, without your statements, without the preliminary breath test, which is inadmissible, but without the test that you'll get at the station, they might not get a conviction. So let's talk about what happens next. Okay, we're at the point where you've been asked all the questions. Hopefully you've declined to answer. You've declined to take the field sobriety test. You haven't taken the preliminary breath test. He only has driving behavior and bloodshot, watery eyes, and you smell like alcohol, according to him. He arrests you, okay? Now you're under arrest. In Virginia, once you're under arrest for DUI, even if there's not enough probable cause, that's figured out in court later. Once you're under arrest for DUI, they take you to the police station or to the jail, and they want to, and you're supposed to take what they call the real breath test, all right, the intoxilizer. It's the breath test at the station that actually prints out a report on what your blood alcohol level is. Now, in Virginia, listen, if you have an agreement when you're driving, whether you have a Virginia driver's license or not, if you're driving on a Virginia road or highway, all right, you have agreed that if you're arrested for DUI, you will take this breath test, okay? You've agreed to do that. You may not know that, but you've agreed to do it. It's called implied consent, okay? So if you're driving on any road or highway in Virginia, you've agreed that if you're arrested for DUI, you're going to take this intoxilizer test at the station. That test is admissible in court, all right? Now, there's more factors in getting it admitted into evidence, but it is admissible, all right? Now, what happens if you don't take this test? You'll be charged with refusal to take the test. And if you're found guilty of that, it's not a criminal offense. It's a civil offense, okay? Meaning that you're even if you're ultimately found not guilty of the DUI, then you could be found still guilty of the refusal, and you would lose your privilege to drive in Virginia for 1 year, and there would be no there's no waiver on that. It's a hard suspension, okay? So you have to keep that in mind. But not taking that test could save you from a conviction for DUI. You understand? Because if you've declined to make any statements, if you decline to make any statements, to take any preliminary breath tests, or to take any field sobriety test prior to arrest, and you're still arrested, if the court finds that your arrest was valid, and then they have a test result for you at the station, then you're going to have a tough time beating that DUI conviction, because that test, it can be overcome, but it's difficult. You have to have a very good lawyer for that, someone like me. But so if you don't take, so it's really up to you. Like, what consequence do you want? Do you want to give them more evidence that you're guilty of DUI by taking a test that's admissible in court? Or do you want to give them less evidence but face a consequence that even if you're found not guilty of the DUI, then you'll still get a suspension on your license for refusal? That's a decision that really you have to make on the spot. So it's something that you have to think about. But let me know. I'm going to tell you how we can get around that breathalyzer test at the station that you're required to take. So understand that there has to be probable cause to arrest you, all right? So if the officer is only left with the smell of alcohol, bloodshot eyes, he's also going to say slurred speech. I forgot about that one. He's going to say you're unsteady on your feet, and he's going to talk about driving behavior. All right. So is that enough probable cause to arrest you when you've taken no field sobriety tests, when you made no statements, and he doesn't have a preliminary breath test from you on the side of the road prior to you being arrested? Is that enough to arrest you? It may not be. One, let's talk about your bloodshot, watery eyes. This officer has never met you before. Maybe that's how your eyes are. You understand? Maybe that's how you look. Who knows? All right. Slurred speech. He's never spoken to you before. Maybe you have a speech impediment. Maybe that's how you talk. All right. Maybe we get around that. The smell of alcohol. Maybe there's somebody else in your car that's also been drinking. Maybe the smell of alcohol is coming from them. Maybe that's how you smell. You never know. All right. Unsteady on your feet, that can be attributed to a bunch of things. The pavement is curved, it's night, you're on gravel, you have high heels on, you got a back problem, you got a sprained ankle, a hurt leg, a whole bunch of things can be attributed to being unsteady on your feet. All right. So that's why they need more evidence from you to have a solid case of probable cause to arrest you. That's why they want you to take those other tests. They want you to take the field sobriety test and the preliminary breath test and answer questions from them prior to them arresting you, because they need to stack up that probable cause. And not having those things, but just having these other things that can be argued against is not the strongest case for probable cause for them. All right. So let's get to the point here. If they don't have enough probable cause to arrest you, but they do anyway, what your lawyer has to do is file what they call a motion to suppress. The motion to suppress will be there's not enough probable cause to arrest you, so that anything that they discovered after your arrest, any evidence that they gathered after your arrest, or anything that happened after your arrest is tossed out. All right. So if you get a motion to suppress any evidence that happened after your arrest because the officer didn't have enough probable cause to arrest you in the first place, you know what's thrown out? If you have decided to take that breathalyzer test, that's thrown out because it happened after your illegal arrest. Your refusal to take that breathalyzer test is thrown out because that happened after your illegal arrest. So if there's not enough probable cause to arrest you and you refuse to take that test, not only will you win your DUI case, but your refusal case will also be thrown out. Understand that. But again, these are decisions that have to be made, in the moment. And most of you all aren't attorneys, and you all don't know what to do, but hopefully this will help you. All right. So those are the basics of what to do during a DUI stop. Now, there are some instances, and it's happening more often lately, that if you do refuse to take the breathalyzer test at the station, that they can draw blood. All right. But the Supreme Court has already held that in order for them to draw blood to get your blood alcohol level, they have to have a warrant. Now, listen, it doesn't take them long to get a warrant. It happens quick in some places, not as quick in other places. But they have to have that warrant in place before they draw blood. So if they draw blood prior to the warrant being issued, that can be thrown out. But do understand that not taking that breath test at the station, understand, not the one on the side of the road, don't worry about that one. But if you don't take the one at the station, they can draw your blood. So that is something where you would have to have a lawyer to attack the blood results in court, okay? But that is a situation that can happen. Another reason why they can draw blood is not just because you're refusing to take the test after being arrested, but if you're incapacitated. So if you're passed out or just totally wasted, they can get a warrant and draw your blood under those circumstances as well. So just understand that. Okay, listen, I want to thank y'all for tuning in. Hopefully this information helps you. Hopefully you're never in that situation, okay? Don't drink and drive. But sometimes we make mistakes, all right? And if you make mistakes, you got to have this knowledge with you. So just try to remember it. And if you're ever in that situation, just apply it. It might work for you.